So today we're going to learn how to make Garfield in Illustrator. This is what our end result is, and right now what you should have open is the Garfield template, which looks like this. So first we're going to start by doing the things that are shapes and not things where we draw the paths. So we're going to start with the ears and the eyes and the nose. And look for what we see. What I see is an oval right here, an oval shape right here, and right here that we can use, and then use add and subtract paths in order to get that shape in the end. So we're going to start with the ears. I see two egg shapes, two oval shapes here, and an oval here, and two ovals here. So we're going to start with that. First, we're just going to be drawing the paths. We don't want to have any fill. So we're going to go up to the very top and turn the fill off by clicking the first button with the red line through it. And now we're going to start by drawing our ovals. I'm going to show you some tips and tricks to do this in Illustrator that save you time, but you can also just make ovals over and 4 different ovals and reposition them if you want. So let's start with the first oval. I'm going to go to the shape tool and choose the ellipse, if it's not already selected as ellipse, and I'm going to draw an ellipse. And I'm going to increase the points on this. I think it's going to be hard to see things that are 2 points. So we're going to make a 3-point ellipse, and then I'm going to go to the selection tool that lets me select the whole path. Because there's no fill, in order to move this, I actually have to click on the path itself, and I'm going to drag it over. I'm going to rotate it, and I'm going to start messing with it in order to get it to be the size of the ellipse that makes the inner ear. And I'm just futzing around with it. You do not need to have this be exact at all. We're really just using the Garfield that we have drawn already as a guide. So if it's not exact, it's not exact, but I'm trying to get it as close as possible, just for the sake of having it match up a little bit. And I think I'm going to go with the direct selection tool maybe and move some of these around a little bit. Now remember, if you go with the direct selection tool, you have to click off the path, click the direct selection tool, and then go hover on the anchor points you want to change and pull those. So I'm going to pull those around a little bit to help get it to match a little bit closer rather than changing the whole path. Now I've got something that's pretty darn close, and what I need to do is create a copy of it that just is rotated over here. Now you have 2 choices. If you feel Illustrator is complicated, it might be easiest for you at this point just to make a copy and then go through that process again. In order to make a copy, you just click and drag on the path and hit the Option key as you drag, and it'll make another copy, and you can move that and rotate that around as you need to and mess with it. What I'm actually going to do is use the rotation tool to create a copy. The rotation tool is halfway down on the left, and I'm going to select the path that I want to rotate. You always have to select your paths first in Illustrator to tell it what you want to use the tool on, because there's usually so many paths. So I use the direct selection tool and the selection tool and select the path, and then I'm going to the rotate tool. The blue point that's here is the point that it rotates around. So if I were to rotate this right now, it's going to rotate around that middle point. In this case, I actually want to pin it down here and have it rotate around from up there, if that makes sense. So the way to move the rotation tool is wherever you click, that's where that blue center point is going to be. I'm going to move it up to the very top, and then I'm going to go down to the bottom and hover on the bottom part of the path and drag, and that's going to rotate it. Now if I don't hit the Option key, it's going to move it. But what I actually want to do is rotate it and make a new copy that matches it. So I hit the Option key as I go, and I let go, and now I have the perfect rotated copy. Now I'm going to reflect it. So if you can imagine, there's a mirror going right down the middle here. I want this like a mirror image of it on the other side, and that's called the reflection tool. Again, if you find Illustrator complicated, You don't have to use these tools. You can just draw another ellipse and then copy it and make another ellipse over here. You don't have to use the reflection tool or the rotation tool. But if you like them, they do save you time. So first I'm going to select the two paths, and I'm going to go down to the reflect tool. That's underneath the rotate tool. It's in that same group. And go to reflect. And again, figure out the point. I want to pin it down and have it reflect around. If I imagine the mirrors here, I want it to reflect around that and around the bottom. So I'm going to click down here on the bottom. I'm going to go up to the top and I'm going to drag. And I'm going to hit the Option key. And now that's made a reflected copy of my ears. And I'm going to go back to this tool and click off it. That's what yours should look like in the end. So look and make sure you know where the ovals are. Draw them however makes the most sense to you at this point. You can pause the video and come back. If you're ready to move on, what we're going to now do is make the eyeballs. Again, those are just some simple ellipses that then I mess around with. So I'm going to click and draw. I hit the Option key. Option key means it's drawing around that center point rather than around the edge. So I'm holding down my Option key as I drew, and I started drawing from the inside out. And then I'm going to go with my direct selection tool, click off it, and then go and mess with some of my anchor points to try to get this to be more egg-like and to match the shape that the original cartoon was drawn in. I'm going to do that one, and now I'm going to go over to the other side. Hit the Option key. Now, if I don't hit the Option key, it uses this part I start at as a corner point and draws out from it. If I hit the Option key, it uses it as the center point and lets me draw out from it. I'm going to go and I'm going to draw it, move it around a little bit. Oops. Go with my direct selection tool, make some changes to some of these anchor points, and there I go. So do that. You can pause and then come back when you're done with that piece. And if you haven't saved it yet, go to Save As and save yourself a copy. Okay. Now, we've used the Pathfinder tool before, which is really complicated, or is really good for simple paths, but when you have complicated paths like this, there's another really sweet tool that makes it really easy to combine them. Because what I want to do is get rid of all this extra parts of the paths that are separating things out and combine them into simple shapes. So what I want to do first, as I said, the first thing you always do is select the paths that you want to affect. So I'm going back to my selection tool. And I'm clicking and I'm just dragging over to highlight all my paths. And the tool we're going to use is something called the Shape Builder tool. It's halfway down on the left, and I can click it. And what the Shape Builder tool does, I'm just hovering, I haven't clicked yet, is it finds places where paths come together to make shapes. You can click, and then that'll make it a permanent shape that's a standalone shape. In this case, we actually want to combine several of these shapes to get to the point where we have just the eyeball shapes, the two loop-de-loops. And to do that, I've selected my paths, I've gone to my Shape Builder tool, and I'm going to click and I'm going to drag over the shapes I want to combine. Boom, it gets rid of the lines in between, and it now has formed this new shape. And I'm going to do that for the eyeballs first, and I'm just clicking and dragging, clicking and dragging. Make sure I get all these little tiny ones that kind of hang out on the edges. And I'm going to make sure I get all the pieces I want. So now I just have the shape of the eyeballs. Now I'm going to go up and do the outside of the ears. Click and drag, click and drag. So now I have that V shape. That's the outside of the ears. And now I'm going to do the inside of the ears. Click and drag, click and drag, click and drag, click and drag. So if I were to turn off the layer, what I now have done is drawn these shapes that match up with Garfield's ears and eyes. Voila. And now I think I will just add the nose as well. So I'm going to go down, I'm going to draw a simple ellipse, for the nose. And again, I'm going to use the shape builder tool to get rid of the little eyeball pieces. I'm going with my selection tool and highlighting the paths that I need the shape builder to take a peek at. Go with the shape builder, click and drag, and now I have the nose. So now that we've gotten these shapes formed and we're happy with that, let's go through and use the pen tool to draw the paths that go around the outside. I'm going to do the inside of the smile first, and then I'm going to do the outside. And just for simplicity's sake, for those of you who might be finding Illustrator a little challenging, I'm not going to do this little loop-de-loop. If you want to do it, do it. Also, just to make things a little simpler down the road, I'm going to draw this going a little bit closer to this path. It's just going to make the painting a little bit easier. So a couple little modifications you'll see as we go. I'm going to make sure first nothing is selected, so go to your direct selection tool and click off. And then I'm going to go with the pen tool and just start drawing my paths. Now remember, I'm dragging in the direction that I want to draw it. And I'm matching it up. Again, don't leave too big of a gap here. It's just going to make it easier later. So that's my first path. Go with my direct selection tool and click off it. Otherwise, it's going to keep going on that same path. So then I'm going to go with a new one. If you want to do the loop-de-loop, do it. But otherwise, I'm just going to go around and do the rest of his smile. Now here's one of those points where I need it to not actually come in and go out the other side. I need this to change, so I'm going to go around to the Convert Anchor Point tool and move that one in a different direction. And then go back to my pen tool and click and drag, whoops, in the direction I want it to go. And I'm just looking at the line that's coming out of the back to make sure it's right. Take my selection tool, and I'm going to go and do this one over here. Perfect. Back to my selection tool and click off it. And now I'm going to go around and do the outside of his face. And I'm starting them in the points where these paths intersect because it's going to make a nice smooth line. So you don't want weird little gaps if you can avoid them. I think I drew that one in the wrong spot, which is a great example because I can easily go back and edit it. Remember, with the direct selection tool, I can actually go in and edit a particular anchor point. So I'm going to click off, and then I'm going to go hover and find that anchor point again. It's white with an outline, and that'll let me just move this to create a smoother line. That's much better. Click off it, go back to my pen tool, continue drawing my paths. Again, I think I'm going to go select this anchor point and make this a little steeper going in. Click off it, go with my pen tool, and go through the rest of the face. And when I'm done, what I want to make sure I do is I have the outlines. So all done. Great, perfect. I have now drawn the outside of my Garfield. I can see this one maybe doesn't intersect as much. Any points that you look at now and you're thinking, oh, that's not quite where I want it to be, just go and move them around, fix it up, make sure your lines are nice. There's no gaps. You can turn off the visibility on the underlying layer by just clicking over here, and that'll let you see what you just drew. We're going to worry about the eyeballs and these little ornamentations later. This is a good point to stop and catch up. Make sure you get it just right. The next video is going to talk about the live paint bucket tool so that we can color it in, and then I'll also talk about how to make the inside lines to create the furry texture. So make sure you get it to this point before you start the next video, and then click on the next on video 2.